And it's 35 years since Bomber Graham, who's now 65, lost the WBC fight with Julian Jackson, KO in 4 rounds in Spain. What are your memories of that time in the very early 1990s?
Yeah. I've only got good memories of Herol Graham, because what you've got to try and remember is before Herol Graham came to Sheffield, there wasn't much boxing in Sheffield, and then you've got Bomber comes along and he's boxing at Sheffield City Hall, topping the bills, boxing, you know, for British, European, Commonwealth titles, and Bramall Lane Open Air Stadium against Lindell Holmes, who did go on to become world champion himself. And then, you know, Bomber Graham is one of these fighters who, for me personally, is one of these fighters that, you know, is the greatest British fighter to never win a world title. You know, he's so close on 3 occasions. I'm happy to say that I was on the shirt tails of Bomber all his career. Many occasions I boxed on his undercard at the City Hall. So I've got.
It was a bad loss for him, that though, wasn't it? He had to rebuild, didn't he, after that?
All his losses for world titles have been unbelievable. You know, he lost to Mike McCallum, who recently just passed away, and you know he got a point taken off him, and he lost on a split. Then he lost to Julian Jackson, one of the worst knockouts you could ever see. And they'd told Julian Jackson before, this is your last round, and he went out and caught Bomber. And then his last world title fight when we were in Atlantic City against Charles Brewer, very unlucky. It just seems it was never written in the stars for Bomber to be world champion, but he was up there with the best of them.
McCallum, did he mention that? Because you spoke to Herol, didn't you, the other day?
Yeah, on finding out that Mike McCallum had sadly died, you know, 68 years old, regarded as one of the all-time greats. And then, you know, Herol boxed him at the Albert Hall, and I remember on the night watching it thinking that Herol had won, and then looking at it again, you know, later on the TV and thinking, but if Herol had not lost a point, he'd have been world champion. But again, it just wasn't meant to be for Herol Graham.
Did he mention that when you spoke to him this week?
Yeah, mentioned it, and obviously everybody's sad. There's been a lot of tragedies for Herol, and this week James Cook, who Bomber beat for the British title at Sheffield City Hall. James Cook sadly died, 65 years old. Mike McCallum, 68. So another boxer from Sheffield, Winston Richards, it's his funeral. So it's been a sad week for Sheffield boxing, really. Like I say, Winston Richards, one of the first kids to turn pro with Brendan back in the day, and then Mike McCallum and James Cook. So it's very, very sad.
How did Bomber cope with that? Because he's had his health issues, hasn't he?
Yeah, like anybody, you know, he just said, you know, it's very, very sad. And, you know, what can you say to things like that? You know, you pick up the phone to somebody to tell them that somebody like Mike McCallum's died. And then James Cook, who Bomber boxed as well. So, you know, you're ringing up to tell him that 2 of the people that he boxed have died.
He didn't know them?
No, he didn't seem to know.
Right.
You know, so
how is he?
He seemed all right. You know, when I spoke to him, it's like everybody. He has good days, bad days. When I last spoke to him, he was having a good day. He seemed chatty and he seemed good. Like all of us, we're getting old, and it's sad when you hear about people passing. But I wouldn't say 65 is what you call old. You know, if you find out somebody's died and they're 80 and 90 year old, well, you know, you can't accept that. But when somebody, a former professional boxer, like say Winston Richards and James Cook, Mike McCallum, they're all relatively not young men, but they're not, I wouldn't say they're old either.
Just briefly, he didn't win a world title. Naz did, Kell Brook did, Johnny Nelson, Clinton Woods did. Does that mean he'll never really get the credit he deserves to being in that category, in that class?
Yeah, Herol never gets the credit, only from, you know, boxing people. He doesn't get much credit for being as good as he was.